So we're coming here today to discuss Kemetic history, right? Like I said before, peace. Like I've said before, I feel as if though not enough people are contributing to the Kemetic conversation. And so here are my contributions. I'm also streaming to my Instagram at the same time, so you're going to see my eyes go up and down, back and forth. Just understand that's what's happening. So now this series, Understanding the People of Kemet, is going to help give us more insight into the everyday life of the people in Kemetic society, right? We're going to discuss this. We didn't know much about Kemet. Truthfully, we just had an understanding of royalty until we discovered this village called Deir el Medina, right? And that once archaeologists discovered Deir el Medina, it contradicted the dominant narrative that everybody understood of Kemetic history, right? Most of what we knew of Kemet came from the inscriptions on the tombs of royalty and the ruling class, right? But insight into the daily life of the common people, that was scarce. That really wasn't known that much, right? It wasn't until the finding of this city, it's called the City of the Tomb Builders, right? Deir el Medina, the city of the men who built the pyramids, right? So this city was built and occupied not by slaves, which is the dominant Jewish, Christian, and Muslim narrative. They would have you believe that Jewish slaves built the pyramid, and that's not true, right? But that's what they would have you believe. But it was built by highly skilled and cherished, honored, workmen who passed on their trade from father to son, which is a tradition that we even see to this day in most of Africa, right? It's not unusual to understand that, traditions of skill is passed on from father to son, right? That's the case with mysticism. That's the case with the priesthood, so on and so forth, right? Now, the best tombs were built for the rulers of the country, right? And we all know this, right? The earliest pyramids, they had a similar shape, and they were built in the city of like Abydos, right, for the ruling class. However, in the beginning of the third dynasty, the African genius Imhotep, he did an innovation, right? He was the prime minister to the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, and he designed the Great Step Pyramid at Saqqara. Understand that, right? And during that time period, there were a lot of different pyramids that were mimicked, like the pyramid of Imhotep or the Step Pyramid, but they didn't really survive that well. There were some that are still there, but the remains aren't really all that great. Saqqara, the best Step Pyramid is Saqqara. So that style of the Step Pyramid, we can see it was improved upon, and then it became the smooth-sided styles of the pyramids we have there with the capstone. So this negates this alien conversation that people are having, that Kemet was built by aliens. Like, come on, people, that's something else. It was African innovations. That's what we got to understand, and we have to claim that. Our people, African people, built Kemetic civilization. The idea that our civilization was built by aliens is simply Western Europeans coming in and not wanting to believe that Africans had the ability to build these great structures. Anyway, So that design that was improved upon, that they approved upon, that Imhotep created, that's how pyramids were created for thousands of years after that, right? Now, the thing that we have to understand about the pyramid is that it's not a single structure. It's not built by itself. It was a whole complex included. There was a valley temple, which is found near the water, right? Then in this area, there was built something specifically. In this area, there was built something specifically for the funeral procession, right? For the body, the procession of the body to get off of the bark or get off the boat and be led to the pyramid, which rested or which was at the edge of the desert. Understand that? Now, next to the pyramid, there was a mortuary temple, right? And in the mortuary temple, this is where prayers and rituals made to the Sheps. Sheps are venerated ancestors. So now that there's some issues with the mortuary temple, I'll be honest, I guess people will be people. That's how it goes. So anyway, now you have to understand that this structure took a long time to build. Like, it's not like these cheap houses that people are building in like 30 or 40 days or like 60 days that fall down or whose sidings come off with a large wind. These temple pyramid complexes took a very long time to build, and every ruler knew this. And they knew, they knew that whoever reigned after him would start construction on their pyramid. And so typically the goal of the rulers in this time period was to have their pyramids built before their death, right? Because the next pharaoh would stop the construction on that old pyramid complex and begin construction on his. And this is what happened. And so there was always a rush happening towards the end. Whenever one pharaoh would pass away and the next would reign, the workmen would be rushing to finish that old pyramid, the other pyramid, to begin the next one, right? Now the pyramids, and that's just how it went. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Now the pyramids at Giza were built in the 4th dynasty, right? And those represent the height of these temple builders. But they are not the only design that existed. This is one thing you have to understand. There's a lot of different designs that were out there, right? But the building of these pyramids took a toll on national resources, right? And this is how it broke down. As more and more rulers built pyramids, and the skill of pyramid building became more widespread, so they were paying more people, right? They didn't just, they weren't slaved out, they were paying these people, right? And then the priesthood, they were also paying a priesthood. The priesthood arose to oversee the building of these projects, right? The resources diminished, and then centralized control over Kemet became dispersed throughout the nation. This is the so-called First Intermediate Period. So what happened in the First Intermediate Period of Ancient Kemet, which are the dynasties 7, 8, 9, 10, and part of 11, is that the nobles of the different cities, called nomes, became as powerful as centralized government, because centralized government essentially wasted its resources. Not wasted per se, but didn't plan on the repercussions of spending so much of its resources and empowering different cities. And so the different people got power and they took over. Essentially, that's how it went. And that was the First Intermediate Period. That's just how it goes. So now the result of like the 4th dynasty, remember I said the 4th dynasty was the height, right, of building these pyramids, right? The result of all of this resource dispersion, so to speak, meant that later pyramids were built, weren't built with the best materials. They were cheaply constructed. You know what I'm saying? Like the inside of the pyramid was kind of built with like rubble stone, so to speak. but the outside of the pyramid was built with good stone structures and a capstone. And it's here, and it's in these tombs, later 4th dynasty, early 5th and 6th dynasty, that we see the pyramid text emerge, you know? So that was that. So this is the deal with Kemet, right? The survival of Kemetic society depended on the proper use of the floodwaters for irrigation. You can't live if you can't feed your people, right? And the rulers would organize the people to construct and maintain the irrigation canals that would channel water to the crops. Every citizen, every Kemetic individual was required to help out with this task on some level. It was a labor tax, so to speak. In Kemetic, like archaeological greater society, it's called a corvée tax. Right? Now, the bulk of people doing this type of work were common citizens. Okay, for people that didn't want to do this task, and people that just wanted to hang out, chill out at home, they would either pay the right person. They would either, talk to the right person and pay the right person, or they would send a substitute, right? They were no different than us. They wanted to relax. Nobody really wants to work hard. And so that's just how it went, So when the Nile, now these people were there working, doing irrigation, and so on and so forth, right? And when the Nile would flood, right? And it would flood the fields, and no work could be done. The rulers would take these same workers who were doing the corvée work, the labor, the tax for being a citizen of Kemet, right? And they would work on the pyramids, right? So the whole story that the pyramids were built by Jewish slave labor, that's a lie. It's a myth. Understand, it never happened, right? And it's because this practice of the citizens of Kemet, that labor practice right there would make it unnecessary to have foreigners come in and build their greater structures. That makes no sense whatsoever. Anyway, the biblical city of Goshen is a tale, can't find it, doesn't exist. The Exodus is a fictional tale, can't find it, doesn't exist. The whole foundational story in this Western traditions is a fiction, can't find it, doesn't exist, right? So this is our challenge. Right? What we have to reveal to the people is that Kemet actually existed. Kemet is a real civilization, right? It's a historical place. It has historical people. It has historical writings, historical monuments, historical accomplishments, right? It's not made up tales and fictional stories of angry, jealous, childish deities. It's a real African-centered, cosmically focused civilization with methods and techniques of conscious transformation into divine beings. That's the Pert Imheru, the Book of the Dead. We see that in their literature. And then a focused civilization with methods and techniques of long-term social organization. Head in the clouds, feet on the ground, right? It was managing the balance between the physical and the spiritual worlds. Unlike other nations were not able to do this. So the concept of the pyramid builders, right? The concept. So now let's touch upon like a myth, right? There's a concept that the pyramid builders were buried with the king. Now that's false. Hold on a second. Now that's false, right? In the earliest times, yes, servants were buried with the king. That's a very, very, very African tradition. That can be found practiced in Ghana today. So we can see the cultural continuity and the Kemetic connection. The African cultural continuity and the Kemetic connection. It's an African tradition to bury servants with the king. I don't like it. I don't think it's cool, but it's there and it exists. Now the servants that would have went with the king would not have been the pyramid builders. You got to understand that connection. They would not have been the pyramid builders because their skill was way too valuable. And the next king would have needed experienced hands, those same men, for his project. Now remember, Got to remember, the building took so long that it would have made no sense to have a brand new set of minds that never built it before work on their project, right? That would have taken extreme amounts of time. So the kings needed experienced builders to build the pyramids, right? So they did not bury the workmen, the pyramid builders. Now the pyramid builders just went from one project to the next. Now the rulers of the intermediate period, because of lack of resources, safety, and security, they built their resting places in rock cliffs. These are known as the rock cliffs tombs. However, the powerful kings of the 12th dynasty went back to the traditional design. You got to understand that. Now, one of the pharaohs of the 12th dynasty, Pharaoh Senusret II, built a city called Kahun. At first, it housed the people who built the pyramids. Later on, however, it came to be used by the priesthood administrators of the Shep's mortuary buildings. So this is how it goes, right? Now, these Shep's buildings were vulnerable to being robbed. And this is the place where a lot of deceased king's valuables were kept. And because of greed, the tombs were robbed by the people. That's just how it goes. People saw some valuables, saw a way to get it, got it. That's just how it goes, right? And honestly, we can probably guess that it was somebody who knew how the pyramids were built. They knew the ins and outs of the pyramids. That's not far off, but that's another tale to be talked about and spoken about another time. Now, to stop this and to counteract this trend, in the New Kingdom, Tutmosis I, the one kicked, almost kicked the Hyksos out. But Tutmosis, his son, he took the tomb, right, his burial place, or the concept of the burial place, and created what's called the valley. Created two things: the Valley of the Kings, and then the Valley of the Queens, right? You see, our African people gave respect to both male and female, which goes into Obati Shaka's teaching of the African mother principle of male-female equality, where all just males and females are equally empowered to govern society, right? That's an African concept. So you can see in African societies and African traditions, you can see the rulership of women and the rulership of men. It wasn't a male-female thing. It was about the justness of character. It was about the building up of spiritual principles within the self to lead yourself to beauty and to success as well as others. That was the test. So in the village, so now let's go back, right? We're talking about the village of Deir el Medina. Now, at first it was administrated over by the advisor to the king. But it eventually was a role that came to be given to like the head builder and head administrator. So in the 18th dynasty, right, Tutmosis I tombs, it was built by this dude named Enini. And Enini also had built the tombs and the constructions at Karnak, as well as some Tekken, or what's known as obelisks, for Tutmosis I. Now Hatshepsut, her temple builder was a guy named Haphuzhoneb, and Haphuzhoneb was the high priest of Amun. And during this time period, tombs were also built for high nobles that could afford them, right? And then we see this a lot. This is the whole coffin texts, age, so to speak. Now, there was a tomb of a noble Ka. He was a foreman at Deir el Medina. His mortuary temple, right, his temple complex, his mortuary temple, totally ransacked. But his underground chamber was found totally intact, right? Here, we can see how fully he and his wife were buried, with coffin text on their coffins, right? However, the Italian invaders took their bodies and put it in their museum. All right, so the last phase that we look at in reference to the tombs of the pyramids, it comes to us from the heretic, the innovationist, the traitor I think the traitor, the supposedly first monotheist in history, Akhenaten, who really took the concept of, actual physical worship of the actual physical disk of the sun. This guy, anyway. Akhenaten moved the capital of Kemet from Thebes to Amarna. This was in order to destabilize the political structure of Kemet, right? And then so that he wouldn't be influenced by the power of the priesthood of Amun, the Theban priesthood. Here he built his city, Akhet Aten, right? And designated the burial site for his dynasty. Now the work at Deir el Medina at this time has stopped. Now that's the history of the royal tombs in Kemet. So the next time that we talk about this, I'm going to talk about the general work person, like what it was like for the general person in Kemet. In the meantime, Om Ashe Hatep, Uncle Jasine. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like and subscribe button. Help me get my views up. Share this information to more people. See you at the morning meditation. Peace.